At exactly 3:43 a.m. on February 14, 2024, Marcus Thompson disabled the elevator between floors 8 and 9, trapping $3.2 million in cash inside for exactly 17 minutes. The security cameras showed a routine elevator malfunction, while Marcus worked in the shaft above, systematically transferring bundles through a ceiling panel he had modified months earlier. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now let's get back to the story. By morning, the money was gone, but the elevator worked perfectly. Marcus had been stealing from the Russian mafia for 11 months, and they still thought he was their most trusted security guard. But this story didn't start with a desperate father stealing millions. It started 11 months earlier when Marcus Thompson thought he was just fixing a broken elevator and discovered something that would transform him from an honest security guard into one of the most sophisticated thieves in Chicago history. Marcus Thompson had been America's most reliable night security supervisor for 4 years at Metropolitan Tower in downtown Chicago. The 38-year-old former Army MP guided the safety of 47 offices across 12 floors, working completely alone from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. every night. His colleagues trusted him completely. His supervisors rated his performance as exemplary, and he had never had a single incident that endangered the building or its tenants. But beneath the surface, Marcus was drowning in problems that would soon drive him to make choices he never imagined possible. Marcus earned $48,000 annually, lived in a cramped studio apartment on the South Side, and drove a 9-year-old Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on the odometer. The car made horrible noises every morning, but Marcus couldn't afford repairs. He was divorced but maintained a hostile relationship with his ex-wife Rebecca, who demanded $2,200 monthly in child support for their 2 kids, Emma age 12 and Jake age 9. The payments were crushing him financially, but he never missed one because losing his kids was his greatest fear and the only thing that kept him working double shifts whenever possible. Rebecca had remarried Dr. James Mitchell, a wealthy cardiologist who lived in a mansion in Lincoln Park and drove a brand new BMW. Every time Marcus picked up his kids, he was reminded of everything he couldn't provide. Emma needed braces that cost $4,000. Jake wanted to play travel baseball, but the fees were $2,500 per season. Both kids attended public school, while their stepfather could afford to send them to the best private schools in Chicago. The contrast was devastating, and Rebecca never let Marcus forget his financial failures. Until November 15, 2023, Marcus was finishing his routine 2 a.m. patrol when the elevator between floors 8 and 9 suddenly stopped responding to calls. The control panel showed a mechanical failure, but Marcus had dealt with elevator problems before. What he found in the shaft would change everything he thought he knew about his quiet office building and set him on a path toward the biggest theft in Chicago history. The elevator shaft had been modified with sophisticated hiding spots built into the walls, recent construction that didn't appear on any building blueprints, professional work with expensive materials, and advanced security features that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tools and equipment left behind suggested regular use by people who knew exactly what they were doing and had unlimited financial resources. Marcus found metal panels welded into the shaft walls, reinforced storage compartments, and even electrical outlets for powering equipment. The modifications were so sophisticated that Marcus initially thought they might be legitimate building improvements he hadn't been told about. But there were no work permits posted, no construction notices, and no mention of elevator shaft renovations in any building documentation. Someone had spent months secretly converting the elevator shaft into a high-tech storage facility without anyone in building management knowing about it. Marcus spent 3 weeks studying the modifications before he understood their purpose. He used his military training to conduct systematic surveillance, noting every detail and documenting everything with photographs taken on his personal phone. The construction quality was military grade, suggesting whoever built this had access to professional contractors and unlimited budgets. During routine security checks of Floor 9, he noticed Petrov International Export had unusual activity every Tuesday night. Lights on at 3 a.m., voices speaking Russian, heavy briefcases being carried through the freight elevator. The same group of four men in expensive suits arrived with multiple briefcases and left with fewer briefcases than they brought. The pattern was precise and never varied. Petrov office occupied every Tuesday 2 to 4 a.m. without exception. Multiple briefcases carried up via freight elevator, always the same four men. Always expensive suits, always speaking Russian. The elevator would malfunction between floors 8 and 9 for exactly 30 minutes each Tuesday, while the men worked upstairs. Then they would leave and the elevator would work perfectly again as if nothing had happened. Marcus realized the malfunctions were deliberate. Someone was using the shaft to hide something during these meetings, and the timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Using the building's maintenance tunnels, Marcus accessed the elevator shaft from above during one of the Tuesday meetings. He moved carefully through the ceiling spaces using techniques he'd learned during his military service. Hidden panels contained stacks of cash totaling approximately $400,000 in bundled hundreds and fifties. The money was stored in waterproof containers with humidity controls to prevent damage. The Russians were using the elevator shaft as temporary money storage, with professional-grade security measures that would fool any casual inspection. Cash stayed there Tuesday night through Friday morning, then got moved somewhere else, probably to banks or other storage facilities. The operation was sophisticated and well-planned, with multiple security layers and backup procedures. Marcus realized he was looking at a professional money laundering operation with millions of dollars flowing through his building every month. Marcus tested their security by taking $800 from one stack, carefully removing bills from the middle of each bundle, where the theft would be least noticeable. He replaced the missing money with newspaper cut to exactly the same size and wrapped with rubber bands to match the original packaging. The money stayed hidden for 3 days before the Russians retrieved it. Nobody noticed the shortage or suspected anything was wrong with their security procedures. His confidence grew over the next month as he conducted more tests. Week 6, he took $1,200 from different bundles spread across multiple storage containers. Week 7, he took $2,000 spread across multiple stacks, always from the middle of bundles, never from the top or bottom, where counting errors would be noticed immediately. Week 8, he took $3,500 and realized the Russians didn't count money carefully during storage. They were sloppy because they never suspected anyone could access their hiding spot or had knowledge of its existence. The Russians trusted their security completely because they owned the building through shell companies and had personally vetted every employee with access to the upper floors. Marcus was invisible to them, just another minimum wage security guard who posed no threat to their operation. Meanwhile, Marcus was drowning financially, and his personal life was collapsing around him. Rebecca had served him with contempt of court papers for missing 2 child support payments when his hours were cut during building renovations. His gambling addiction had spiraled out of control after he started playing online poker to try to make extra money for child support. What began as $50 bets had escalated to thousands of dollars per night, and Marcus now owed $180,000 to underground bookmakers who were threatening violence if he didn't pay immediately. The gambling debts were compounded by his discovery that Rebecca was planning to move to California with her new husband, Dr. James Mitchell, a wealthy cardiologist who could provide everything Marcus couldn't. Private schools for the kids, a huge house in Beverly Hills, unlimited money for activities and opportunities, and most importantly, stability that Marcus could never offer. Rebecca made it clear Marcus could either pay $50,000 immediately for the kids' private school tuition and various expenses, plus catch up on missed child support, or lose them forever when she moved across the country with her new family. The breaking point came when loan sharks working for the underground casino operation visited Marcus at his apartment. They made it clear he had exactly 30 days to pay the $180,000, or they would break his legs and then go after his children to collect the debt. Marcus realized his gambling addiction had not only destroyed his finances, but now threatened his kids' safety. The same week, Rebecca announced she was filing for full custody and moving to California within 60 days unless Marcus could prove financial stability. That night, Marcus sat in his car outside his ex-wife's house, watching through the window as Dr. Mitchell helped Emma with her homework, while Jake practiced piano on an expensive baby grand. The scene he should have been part of but couldn't afford to maintain. His military training had taught him to assess threats and develop solutions under pressure. The Russians upstairs had more money than they could count, and Marcus had access they didn't know existed. The solution was obvious, even if it meant crossing lines he had never imagined crossing. He spent the next month using his military surveillance training to study the Russian operation with the same intensity he had once used to track insurgents in Afghanistan. Installing hidden cameras in air vents overlooking the Petrov office using equipment purchased with his stolen money. Tapping into the building's phone system to monitor conversations using skills learned during his time as a military police investigator. Mapping all access points and escape routes throughout the building. Learning the Russian schedules and identifying key personnel through systematic observation and intelligence gathering. Through surveillance, Marcus discovered that Petrov International was a front for a sophisticated money laundering operation connected to Russian organized crime. Between $800,000 and $1.2 million flowed through the building every Tuesday, representing proceeds from drug sales, weapons trafficking, and other criminal enterprises. Money came from street-level dealers and went to weapons purchases and international transfers. The Russians used this specific building because they owned the property management company through a series of shell corporations and had specifically chosen it because the security guard is reliable and poses no threat to operations. Marcus learned the names and roles of key personnel through patient observation. Dmitry Kozlov was the security expert who periodically inspected operations. Igor Petrov was the front man who managed day-to-day operations. Sergei Volkov was the accountant who maintained financial records. Viktor Orlov was the cryptocurrency expert who handled digital conversions. Each man had specific responsibilities and security protocols that Marcus began to understand and exploit. Marcus installed a sophisticated pulley system in the elevator shaft to quickly move money between floors without being detected by security cameras or casual observation. He built a temporary storage compartment on floor 7, which was always empty at night and belonged to a law firm that only worked during normal business hours. He modified the elevator controls so he could create genuine malfunctions on command that would appear legitimate to anyone investigating. Every modification looked like standard building maintenance that was part of his job responsibilities and wouldn't attract attention from building management or tenants. Month 3. Marcus planned his first significant theft, $15,000 from a single Tuesday storage operation. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution. He waited until the Russians stored their money and left usually around 3:30 a.m. after completing their business. Created an elevator malfunction to justify being in the shaft and provide cover for his activities. Transferred $15,000 to his floor 7 hiding spot using the pulley system he had installed. Restored elevator function before the 6 a.m. shift change when the day security guard arrived. Retrieved the money from floor 7 during the following week's patrols when the building was empty and no one would question his presence on that floor. The execution was flawless and demonstrated Marcus' natural ability for criminal planning. Russians stored $950,000 as usual and left at 3:28 a.m. after completing their money counting and verification procedures. Marcus triggered the elevator malfunction at 3:35 a.m. using controls he had secretly modified weeks earlier. Accessed the hidden panels and removed $15,000 from 3 different stacks, always taking money from the middle of bundles where the theft would be least noticeable. Used his pulley system to transfer the money to floor 7 in exactly 12 minutes following a precise timeline he had rehearsed multiple times. Restored elevator function at 3:52 a.m., ensuring everything appeared normal for the morning shift. But at 3:48 a.m., one Russian named Igor returned to the building claiming he forgot something important. Marcus was in the elevator shaft with $15,000 in his backpack when he heard Igor's voice in the lobby, talking to the night desk clerk in heavily accented English. Marcus had to stay completely silent in the cramped shaft for 8 minutes, while Igor checked the Petrov office and searched for whatever he claimed to have forgotten. Igor left without noticing anything suspicious, but Marcus realized they might have spotters watching the building or backup security procedures he hadn't discovered yet. The close call taught Marcus he needed better intelligence and more sophisticated equipment if he wanted to continue stealing without getting caught. He used the stolen money to purchase professional-grade surveillance equipment from military surplus dealers who didn't ask questions about cash transactions. Lockpicking tools for accessing other offices without leaving traces. High-tech listening devices for better surveillance of Russian conversations. Modified security uniforms with hidden pockets for money transport that wouldn't show up on security cameras. Encrypted communication equipment to monitor Russian cell phones and intercept their messages. Month 4. Marcus discovered through enhanced surveillance that the Russians sometimes stored money for an entire week during complex international transfers that required coordination with banks in multiple countries. Through phone taps, he learned about an upcoming large storage operation that would be his biggest opportunity yet. $1.8 million would be stored for a full week, while Russian banks processed transfers for a major arms shipment destined for Eastern Europe. If the transfers failed, the money would go to a backup plan involving cryptocurrency conversion through exchanges that didn't report to U.S. authorities. Marcus developed a plan to steal over multiple days rather than trying to take everything at once. Day 1, he took $12,000 and established the money was being stored long-term rather than moved quickly. Day 3, he took $18,000 and confirmed the Russians still hadn't checked the storage or noticed any discrepancies. Day 5, he took $15,000 in his final theft before the weekly pickup scheduled for Friday night. The gradual approach minimized risk while maximizing his take from the operation. On Day 4, Russian security expert Dmitry Kozlov arrived unexpectedly at 1 a.m. to inspect building security after receiving reports about unusual elevator malfunctions. Marcus was in the floor 7 office retrieving previously stolen money when he saw Kozlov on the security monitors entering the building with 2 other men who looked like professional bodyguards. He had exactly 3 minutes to hide $33,000 in cash and get back to the security desk before Kozlov reached him and began asking questions about building security protocols. Marcus used the maintenance tunnel to travel between floors, a route he had mapped and practiced dozens of times for exactly this type of emergency. He arrived at his desk exactly 30 seconds before Kozlov entered the security office. Kozlov actually praised Marcus for excellent response time to the security alert and said he was impressed by how quickly Marcus had responded to his unannounced visit. The close call convinced Marcus he was becoming invisible to the Russians, who saw him as just another reliable employee rather than a potential threat. Month 5, the Russians stored their largest amount yet $2.3 million for an international weapons purchase that would supply armed groups in 3 different countries. Marcus used his new lockpicking skills to access the Petrov office directly, rather than relying solely on elevator shaft access. He discovered the Russians kept detailed money logs in the office safe, but realized they tracked total amounts without recording individual bill serial numbers or maintaining detailed inventories. This oversight gave Marcus opportunities to steal larger amounts while manipulating records to hide the thefts. Marcus took $85,000 over 3 days while altering computer records to match the reduced totals and make everything appear legitimate. He had taught himself basic computer hacking using online tutorials and practice on the building's network. The Russians' financial tracking system was surprisingly primitive and vulnerable to manipulation by anyone with basic technical skills and physical access to their computers. While Marcus was in the Petrov office altering records, Russian accountant Sergei arrived at 2:30 a.m. 3 hours early to prepare for a morning meeting with international contacts. Marcus heard the elevator ascending and had exactly 45 seconds to hide before Sergei entered the office. He crawled into the office air vent with his laptop still open, showing safe cracking software that would have immediately exposed his criminal activities. Sergei worked in the office for 2 hours while Marcus remained motionless in the ceiling, listening to phone conversations and learning valuable intelligence about upcoming operations. Sergei noticed the computer was left on, but assumed it was his mistake rather than evidence of infiltration. Marcus waited until 5 a.m. to emerge from the vent after Sergei finally left for the night. The experience taught Marcus that he needed to be even more careful about timing and develop better escape procedures for situations when Russians arrived unexpectedly. He began studying their communication patterns more closely and learned to predict when they might deviate from normal schedules. Month 7. Marcus realized he needed to manipulate Russian digital records to steal larger amounts without detection as his previous methods were reaching their limits. He learned Russian language using stolen money for private tutors who taught him to read financial documents and understand technical conversations. Studied cryptocurrency and international banking systems through online courses and purchased textbooks. Hacked into Russian computer systems using the office network access and discovered they kept detailed financial records on encrypted drives that contained information about operations across multiple cities. Marcus discovered the Russians were converting cash to cryptocurrency through a local exchange that specialized in transactions for foreign nationals. When they stored $2.8 million cash for conversion to Bitcoin, Marcus saw an unprecedented opportunity. Exchange rate fluctuations would provide perfect cover for missing money, since rates changed constantly, and small discrepancies could be explained as timing differences. He manipulated the exchange records to show lower conversion rates while stealing $180,000 and making digital records show the full amount was converted at favorable rates. The operation required Marcus to access Russian computers and modify exchange rate data in real time. Physically remove $180,000 from storage over 2 nights, while the conversion was allegedly taking place. Alter transaction logs to show cryptocurrency purchases at inflated rates that would account for the missing cash. The Russians believed they received full Bitcoin value despite the missing cash because the digital records showed successful transactions at market rates. Cryptocurrency exchange owner Viktor Orlov arrived at the building to verify the large transaction after his automated systems flagged unusual patterns in the conversion data. Marcus was accessing Russian computers when Orlov demanded to inspect the office personally and verify all transaction details. Marcus had to delete evidence of his intrusion, restore original files, and get back to the security desk while Orlov was in the elevator ascending to the 9th floor. He used the emergency stairwell to race down 9 floors in 90 seconds, arriving at his desk breathing heavily and sweating profusely from the physical exertion. Orlov questioned Marcus extensively about building security during cryptocurrency transactions, asking specific questions about who had access to the office and whether Marcus had noticed any unusual activity. Marcus convinced him everything was secure by providing detailed logs of his security patrols and demonstrating his thorough knowledge of building security procedures. Orlov left satisfied that the building was secure, but Marcus realized the Russians were becoming more suspicious about potential security breaches. Month 8. Marcus discovered through enhanced surveillance that the Russians were planning their largest money storage operation ever, $8 million, for a major international deal that would establish new trafficking routes through Eastern Europe. The intelligence came from a combination of intercepted phone calls, encrypted message decryption, and direct observation of planning meetings that lasted for weeks. Marcus had upgraded his surveillance equipment using proceeds from previous thefts, purchasing military-grade listening devices that could penetrate concrete walls and pick up conversations from 3 floors away. He installed fiber optic cameras smaller than pencil tips throughout the building ventilation system, giving him visual access to every room the Russians used. Most importantly, he had learned to decrypt their encrypted messaging system by copying their phones during routine security checks and installing monitoring software that transmitted everything to his hidden computer network. Through weeks of patient intelligence gathering, Marcus learned the operation involved purchasing an entire weapons shipment from corrupt military officials in 3 former Soviet republics. The deal included assault rifles, ammunition rocket-propelled grenades, and plastic explosives that would be distributed to armed groups in Syria, Afghanistan, and several African countries. The Russians were acting as middlemen, taking a percentage while facilitating weapons flows that would fuel conflicts for years. The $8 million represented contributions from 3 competing Russian factions who had agreed to cooperate on this specific deal, despite their mutual hatred and distrust. Faction A, led by Dmitry Kozlov, controlled drug trafficking on the south side and contributed $3 million. Faction B, led by Viktor Petrov, managed money laundering operations downtown and contributed $2.5 million. Faction C, led by Sergei Volkov, handled weapons trafficking through the ports and contributed $2.5 million. Each faction leader despised the others and suspected them of planning to steal money or sabotage the deal. Marcus listened to hours of recorded conversations where they accused each other of past betrayals, discussed previous attempts to eliminate rivals, and made threats about what would happen if anyone tried to cheat on this deal. Kozlov had apparently killed Petrov's brother in 2019 over a territorial dispute. Petrov had stolen a weapons shipment from Volkov in 2020, causing millions in losses. Volkov had informed police about Kozlov's drug operations, leading to multiple arrests in 2021. Their mutual distrust created perfect conditions for Marcus to exploit. He spent weeks studying each leader's personality weaknesses and communication patterns. Kozlov was paranoid and violent, but not particularly intelligent, often making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Petrov was greedy and ambitious, but cowardly, preferring to use others to do dangerous work. Volkov was intelligent and calculating, but had a massive ego that made him vulnerable to manipulation. Marcus developed detailed psychological profiles of each leader and their key subordinates. He learned their personal histories, family relationships, financial problems, and criminal records through careful research and surveillance. Most importantly, he identified the specific triggers that would make each faction suspect the others of betrayal. The planning required Marcus to create sophisticated forged documents that would implicate each faction in stealing from the others. He purchased professional document creation equipment and learned advanced forgery techniques through online tutorials and practice. The forged evidence had to be perfect because any obvious fake would expose his involvement and likely result in his death. Marcus created fake bank transfer records showing money moving between accounts controlled by different factions. Forged emails discussing plans to steal money from the joint operation. Modified audio recordings of conversations where faction leaders discussed betraying their partners. Planted physical evidence in offices that would suggest planning for theft or sabotage. The psychological warfare campaign had to be timed perfectly to maximize confusion while minimizing the risk of the factions discovering his involvement. Marcus planned to steal money over multiple days while simultaneously releasing forged evidence that would make each faction believe the others were responsible for the missing funds. As Marcus finalized his plans, he realized this operation would either make him rich beyond his dreams or get him killed in the most brutal way imaginable. The Russians he was targeting had murdered dozens of people over money disputes and would not hesitate to torture him to death if they discovered his involvement. But the potential payoff was life-changing money that would solve all his financial problems, pay off his dangerous gambling debts, and give his children opportunities he could never provide on a security guard's salary while keeping them safe from the loan sharks who had threatened their lives. The night before the operation began, Marcus sat in his apartment looking at photos of Emma and Jake, knowing he might never see them again if something went wrong. He had written letters to each child explaining why he had made these choices and hidden the letters where they would be found if he disappeared. He also created detailed instructions for accessing the trust funds he had established, using stolen money, ensuring his children would benefit from his crimes, even if he paid the ultimate price for committing them. Marcus planned his most sophisticated theft, yet using the faction tensions to his advantage and their mutual distrust as cover for his activities. He would take money from each faction's contribution at different times, manipulate storage logs to suggest other factions were stealing from the common fund, create evidence pointing to internal Russian power struggles and financial disputes, use faction paranoia to explain the missing money, and redirect suspicion away from external threats like building security or law enforcement surveillance. But before I tell you how Marcus pulled off this incredible heist, I need to ask you something. If you're enjoying this story about the most audacious theft in Chicago history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And let me know in the comments what you think Marcus should have done differently. Would you have taken the same risks for that kind of money? Your support helps me bring you more incredible true crime stories like this one. Now let's see how Marcus executed the perfect crime. Over 10 days, Marcus executed his psychological warfare plan with military precision. Days 1 through 3, he took $300,000 from Faction A and planted evidence suggesting Faction B was responsible, including forged documents and manipulated computer records. Days 4 through 6, he took $250,000 from Faction B and created evidence pointing to Faction C, including intercepted communications and financial irregularities. Days 7 through 9, he took $300,000 from Faction C and left clues implicating Faction A, including suspicious money transfers and altered accounting records. Day 10, he watched through surveillance as the factions accused each other of theft and demanded investigations into internal security breaches. All three faction leaders arrived simultaneously on Day 8 to inspect their money storage and investigate reports of missing funds from multiple contributors. Marcus was in the elevator shaft transferring $150,000 when he heard heated Russian arguments from the office above, escalating into threats and accusations of betrayal. The faction meeting had turned violent, with guns being drawn and threats being made. Gunshots were fired, and Marcus could hear furniture being overturned and windows breaking. Marcus was trapped in the shaft for 3 hours, while Russians searched the building for evidence of theft and tried to determine who was responsible for the missing money. Police arrived to investigate noise complaints from neighboring buildings, but the Russians convinced them it was just a business meeting that got emotional over contract negotiations. Marcus had to remain hidden with stolen money while police searched the building and questioned the Russians about the disturbance. He used the maintenance tunnel to escape the shaft and hide the money before police reached the security desk and began asking questions about building security and what he had observed during the night. By month 11, Marcus had stolen over $1.8 million and learned through intercepted communications that the FBI was closing in on the Russian money laundering network after receiving tips from informants and conducting their own surveillance. The Russians were liquidating all U.S. assets within 48 hours and preparing to flee the country permanently. $8.5 million total would pass through the building in one final operation, representing the liquidation of years of accumulated profits. After this storage, the Russians would disappear permanently, and Marcus would lose his access to easy money forever. This was Marcus' last chance for a life-changing theft that would set him up financially for the rest of his life. Marcus developed his most complex operation, combining everything he had learned over 11 months of systematic theft. He would steal $3.2 million during the final 48-hour storage period, while the Russians were focused on their escape preparations. Frame the theft as an FBI raid to explain the missing money and deflect suspicion from internal security breaches. Disappear before Russians or FBI discovered the real theft and connected it to building security. Trigger building evacuation during the theft for cover and use the chaos to escape with stolen money. February 13th, the Russians stored $8.5 million as planned, representing the liquidation of their entire Chicago operation. Marcus confirmed the money location and security measures through his surveillance network. He triggered the building fire alarm at 11 p.m. to test evacuation procedures and observed Russian panic responses and security protocols during the emergency. The Russians reacted exactly as Marcus predicted, showing they were focused on protecting the money rather than investigating potential security threats. February 14th at 2:30 a.m., the Russians conducted their final count, confirming $8.5 million was properly stored and secured. At 3:15 a.m., the Russians left the building with return planned for 6 a.m. pickup, when armored cars would arrive to transport the money to the airport. At 3:43 a.m., Marcus executed the elevator trap plan from the opening scene using techniques perfected over 11 months of practice. From 3:45 to 4:02 a.m., he transferred $3.2 million through ceiling panels to floor 7, using his sophisticated pulley system and military training in rapid movement under pressure. At 4:15 a.m., he triggered the building's emergency lockdown system, creating the impression that federal agents had activated security protocols. At 4:30 a.m., he planted evidence suggesting FBI surveillance equipment had been monitoring the building, including fake listening devices and surveillance cameras. At 5 a.m., he created fake alarms indicating a federal raid in progress, using the building's public address system and emergency notification protocols. At 5:15 a.m., he evacuated the building carrying stolen money in emergency supply bags that looked like legitimate security equipment to any casual observer. At 5:45 a.m., the actual FBI arrived for a real raid on the Russian operation, based on months of surveillance and informant reports. Marcus was in the parking garage loading $3.2 million into his personal vehicle when federal agents surrounded the building and established a security perimeter. He had to drive past the FBI checkpoint while carrying stolen money and avoid arousing suspicion from federal agents who were focused on capturing Russian criminals. Using his security guard uniform and emergency evacuation protocols, Marcus convinced agents he was helping secure the building and evacuate any remaining personnel. An FBI agent asked Marcus to stay for questioning about Russian activities and what he had observed during his employment at the building. Marcus agreed to return after securing off-site backup systems and ensuring building security was maintained, but drove away and never returned to face questioning. Marcus activated the escape plan he had perfected over 11 months using contingencies developed for exactly this scenario. He left evidence suggesting he was killed during the FBI raid by planting his security badge in blood from a deliberate cut in the building. Russian and FBI investigations both assumed he was dead, based on the evidence and the violent nature of the raid. This created a 48-hour head start while everyone searched for his body instead of tracking a living fugitive. Marcus used stolen money to purchase a complete identity package through contacts he had developed in Chicago's criminal underground, became David Wilson, a former military contractor with legitimate documentation and background history, established a legitimate business buying and selling military surplus using his real knowledge and experience from Army service, moved to a Montana ranch purchased with cash through shell companies that couldn't be traced to his original identity. Marcus converted $2.8 million to cryptocurrency and offshore accounts using methods he had learned while studying Russian money laundering techniques, sent $180,000 to pay off his gambling debts through untraceable transactions that protected his new identity, established a trust fund for his children's education worth $500,000 that would pay for college and graduate school, kept $400,000 liquid for operational security and emergency escape funds in case his new identity was ever compromised. The Russians blamed the FBI for the missing $3.2 million, believing federal agents had seized the money during the raid. Faction leaders were eliminated by their superiors for losing the money and failing to maintain proper security. The building was abandoned, and Russians fled to Europe permanently after liquidating all remaining U.S. assets. A $500,000 bounty was placed on Marcus, who they believed was dead but wanted confirmation of his fate. The FBI assumed Marcus was killed by Russians during the raid based on the blood evidence and missing person reports. They searched for his body for 6 months before closing the case as unsolved. They never discovered the connection between the missing guard and stolen money because all evidence pointed to Marcus being a victim rather than a perpetrator. The case was filed as probable homicide during organized crime investigation with no suspects identified. Marcus successfully operated a military surplus business in Montana under his new identity as David Wilson, maintained a low profile with no contact with his previous life or family members, monitored news for signs of continued investigation into his disappearance or the Russian money laundering case, prepared secondary escape plans for ultimate security, including additional false identities and offshore accounts in case his cover was ever blown. 2 years later, Dmitry Kozlov, the only surviving Russian from the original operation, received an anonymous package at his location in Prague, where he had fled after the Chicago operations collapsed. Security footage of Marcus stealing money during every major theft over 11 months of systematic robbery. Financial records showing exactly how much was stolen and when each theft occurred. Photos of Marcus' new life in Montana taken from a distance showing him operating his legitimate business. A note that read, "A good security guard always watches everything. Some secrets are worth more than money." The package included a cryptocurrency wallet containing $50,000 and coordinates to a location where additional evidence was buried. When Russians arrived at the coordinates, they found an empty grave marked, "Here lies Marcus Thompson. Died February 14, 2024, and a second note, "I died the night I decided to steal from you. The man who took your money was someone else entirely." Marcus Thompson completely ceased to exist on February 14, 2024. David Wilson, successful military surplus dealer, continues living peacefully in Montana, occasionally laughing when he reads news reports about the unsolved Russian money laundering case and missing security guard presumed dead. Last month, David Wilson received a letter at his Montana ranch. No return address, just his daughter's handwriting on expensive private school stationery. Dad, I don't know if you're alive, but if you are, thank you for my college fund. I start Harvard pre-med next fall. Mom says you died a hero, but I think you just became one. Emma. The Russians learned an expensive lesson. The person you trust to guard your money might be the most dangerous thief of all, especially when they have nothing left to lose and everything to gain.